The sun had barely risen over the horizon when Alina stepped onto the dusty grounds of the military academy, her boots crunching against the gravel, her heart pounding with a mixture of fear and determination. She had traveled across the country to reach this place, a place known for breaking spirits and forging warriors. Alina knew that the journey ahead would be grueling, harder than anything she had faced before, but she also knew that giving up was not an option. Not now. Not after everything she had endured. The sergeant who first laid eyes on her was Sergeant Colt, a man whose reputation for strict discipline was legendary. His eyes narrowed as he watched Alina approach the group of new recruits lined up like soldiers on parade. He had seen hundreds like her before, young hopefuls full of dreams but lacking the grit and the resolve to survive here. He was certain she would crumble under the pressure. Alina felt his gaze like a weight pressing down on her back, but she refused to look away. Her chin lifted, her posture straight as an arrow. She wanted to prove that she was not just another face in the crowd. She was different. She carried secrets and scars that no one here could understand, but she was ready to show that strength. Was not only measured in muscle, but also in will. The morning drills began with relentless intensity. The sun climbed higher, beating down on the recruits as they ran obstacle courses, dragged heavy equipment, and memorized endless protocols. Alina moved with a grace that belied her size, her mind sharp as a blade, memorizing commands faster than anyone else. Her body ached, but she pushed through the pain, each step bringing her closer to the goal. Despite her performance, Sergeant Colt remained, a shadow of doubt standing at the sidelines, watching her every move, waiting for a mistake, waiting for her to falter. Alina knew he was hunting for a reason to dismiss her, not because she was weak, but because she threatened the order he had built. On unquestioning obedience, the days turned into weeks, and the weeks into a blur of sweat, exhaustion, and relentless training. The other recruits started to notice Alina not as an outsider, but as a force to be reckoned with. Some whispered about her. Past others speculated about the mysterious scars she tried to hide under her uniform, but no one dared to ask the questions out loud. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the training ground, Alina stood alone, practicing her combat moves in the fading light. When Sergeant Colt approached, the silence between them was thick like the calm before a storm. He said nothing at first, just watched her move with an intensity that made her skin crawl. Suddenly he broke the silence with a voice cold and sharp. "Did you think this would be easy, Alina? You are not like the others, and not in a good way. This place will chew you up and spit you out if you are not careful. The next time you step out of line, there will be consequences." Her heart skipped a beat, but she met his gaze without flinching. "I am not here to be easy or comfortable," she said quietly. "I am here to be the best." Whether he believed her or not was unclear, but what mattered was that Alina had declared her intent, and the game had changed. The sergeant's scowl deepened, and he turned on his heel, disappearing into the shadows, leaving her standing alone with the night creeping in around her. That night, as Alina lay on the hard cot in the barracks, her mind replayed every word, every glance, every doubt she had felt. The walls around her seemed to close in, but she whispered a promise to herself. She would not be expelled or broken or forgotten. Not by Sergeant Colt, not by anyone. This was her fight, and she would see it through, even if it meant walking through fire. The next morning dawned with a restless energy. The recruits gathered for a surprise inspection led by the academy's highest officers. Alina stood at attention, heart steady but aware that every second could change her fate. The sergeant's eyes locked on her, and she caught a flicker of something new. Suspicion, perhaps, or fear. Whatever it was, it made her pulse quicken. Then came the moment that shifted everything. The hostage rescue simulation was underway, and Alina volunteered to lead her team through smoke and chaos. She moved with precision, her commands clear and confident. The other recruits faltered under pressure, but she pressed on, driven by something deeper than training. Sergeant Colt watched from the observation deck, his expression darkening with every success she had. She had broken protocol and yet saved lives, a fact that unsettled the rigid order he maintained. When the drill ended, he called her in for a private conversation, the tension in the room thick enough to suffocate. "You defied orders, Alina," he said, his voice low and accusing. "Your recklessness could have cost lives. You are a liability." He slid a folder across the table, the expulsion papers staring back at her like a verdict. Her breath hitched, and her fingers trembled, but her eyes burned with a fierce resolve. "This is not over," she whispered before turning on her heel and walking out of the office. The hallway stretched before her like a gauntlet, and every step echoed her defiance. The sergeant's shadow followed close behind, a reminder that the fight was far from finished, and that the next move could change everything forever. Alina walked down the cold, sterile hallway, her mind racing faster than her footsteps. She could feel the weight of the expulsion papers burning a hole in her pocket, as if the paper itself wanted to remind her of her failure. But failure was a word she refused to accept. Not now, not ever. She had come too far and sacrificed too much to be cast aside by Sergeant Colt or anyone else. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sudden screech of tires outside. The sharp sound made her pause and glance through the narrow window of the barracks door. Just beyond the perimeter fence, a black SUV had pulled up its dark windows, reflecting the rising sun like a mirror. She had never seen that vehicle on base before, and something about it set her nerves on edge. Before she could move, the door to the barracks swung open and a man stepped inside. The uniform he wore was not military, but his bearing carried authority. His eyes were intense, scanning her from head to toe with the weight of unspoken knowledge. His voice was calm, but carried an unmistakable urgency. "Miss Alina," said the man, "I am here on orders from higher up to deliver a message. You are to report immediately to the command center." There was no room for argument in his tone, and Alina nodded without hesitation. She grabbed the envelope sealed with an official emblem from his outstretched hand and followed him through the labyrinth of corridors. As they moved through the base, Alina noticed more signs of tension. The usual hum of activity was muted, conversations hushed, and soldiers casting wary glances in her direction. She felt the eyes of Sergeant Colt burning holes into her back, but said nothing, just kept walking. The man beside her remained silent, as if guarding a secret that weighed heavily on them both. When they arrived at the command center, a large room filled with maps and blinking screens, Alina was directed to wait near the main console. The man left without a word, and she was left alone, surrounded by faces she had never seen before, generals and officers who looked at her as if she were a puzzle to be solved. Minutes passed like hours, until a sharp voice cut through the tension. General Marks stepped forward, his expression grim. He addressed the room first, then fixed his gaze on Alina. "There are questions about your background that require answers," he said. "Your mother was involved in operations that were classified beyond clearance, and her disappearance has left many unanswered." Alina clenched her fists. Inside her jacket, her mother's name was a ghost in her life, mentioned only in fragments and fears. Now those fragments were coming back to haunt her, and she was caught in the middle of a web far bigger than herself. She opened her mouth to speak, but the room fell silent again as the door burst open. Two MPs stepped inside, eyes scanning the room before locking on Alina. They moved toward her, with practiced efficiency orders coming through their radios. She was to be detained pending investigation. Her heart pounded, but she refused to be cowed. This was no ordinary accusation, and she had no intention of going quietly. Before the MPs could reach her, a crackling sound filled the room. The intercom came to life, and every speaker across the base broadcasted a voice strong and clear. The President of the United States demanded to speak to Alina immediately over a secure line. The room froze, and all eyes turned to her. As the call was connected, Alina felt a strange calm wash over her as she stepped forward and took the receiver. Her voice steady, she answered the call. The silence that followed was so thick it felt like the world had stopped spinning. Then the President spoke 3 words that changed everything and sent a ripple of shock through the highest ranks. Those words echoed in her mind as the MPs backed away and the generals scrambled to adjust their plans. The envelope in her hand suddenly felt heavier, as if it contained not just paper, but the fate of nations. The question remained who had sent that car, and what was the true purpose of the message she carried. The war room was a stark space filled with screens flashing maps and cryptic data. Alina felt the cold steel of the table beneath her palms as she stood among the generals and officers whose faces betrayed a mixture of curiosity, suspicion, and urgency. The envelope in her hand seemed to pulse with an invisible energy, a reminder of the secret it held that could shift the balance of power in ways she could barely imagine. General Marks stepped forward, his eyes sharp as a hawk. He addressed the assembled officers with a grave tone. There are questions that need answering about this recruit and her. Connections to classified operations from decades ago. He looked directly at Alina and added, "We cannot afford mistakes or half-truths. Not here. Not now." Alina's mind raced as she tried to piece together what was unfolding. She knew her mother's past was tangled with shadows and secrets, but what she did not know was how deeply those shadows still reached into the heart of power. As the generals debated her fate, she felt the weight of their judgment pressing down on her. Suddenly, the doors to the war room slammed open, and 2 MPs escorted Sergeant Colt into the room. His face was flushed with anger and frustration, but there was also a hint of something else, something closer to fear. He glanced at Alina with a mixture of hatred and something unreadable before turning his attention to General Marks. Colt began his report with a clipped voice. "There is evidence that this recruit has breached security protocols multiple times. She has accessed information beyond her clearance and communicated with unknown contacts outside the base." His words hung in the air like a challenge, as if daring someone to contradict him. Alina took a deep breath and stepped forward, her voice steady but filled with conviction. "I did what was necessary to survive and to protect others. I never betrayed this place or the mission. I am here because I have to be, not because I want to be, but because the truth I carry is bigger than any of us." The room fell into a tense silence, as if everyone was waiting for the next move. General Marks nodded slowly and gestured for one of the aides to bring the envelope forward. He carefully broke the seal and unfolded the documents inside. The papers were stamped with levels of clearance so high they made Alina's head spin. The contents detailed covert operations, a map with marked locations, and a series of encrypted messages that hinted at a threat nobody else had seen coming. As the general studied the papers, the atmosphere shifted from suspicion to urgent concern. The threat outlined in the documents was unlike anything the military had prepared, for something lurking in the shadows threatening national security. Alina realized that the message she carried was not just about her past, but about the future of the country itself. Then General Marks turned to Sergeant Colt with a hard glare. "You were wrong to try to expel her," he said coldly. "This recruit may be the key to preventing a catastrophe." And with that, the room erupted into activity orders. Were given to ramp up security and to start decoding the encrypted messages with all available resources. Alina stood quietly absorbing the whirlwind around her, but her thoughts kept drifting back to the black SUV and the man who had delivered. The envelope. She wondered who else was involved and what they knew about her and her mother. The questions gnawed at her like an itch she could not scratch, and she knew that the answers were out there, waiting in the dark. The generals moved quickly. To set up a task force with Alina at its center, her knowledge and instincts suddenly valuable assets. Her status shifted from suspect to indispensable, but the danger had not passed. She had become a target not just within the academy, but far beyond. Its walls and every step forward was shadowed by the threat of betrayal. That night, as the base settled into uneasy quiet, Alina sat alone in her quarters, poring over the documents. The encrypted messages teased her with glimpses of something enormous and terrifying, a conspiracy that reached into the highest offices and touched lives in ways she could barely grasp. Her fingers traced the lines of coded text, hoping to find the key to unlock the truth. Her phone buzzed. Suddenly, a message appeared. From an unknown number, a simple line that chilled her to the bone. "They know who you are, and they are coming for you." The room seemed to close in around her, and she realized that the fight she had stepped into was bigger and deadlier than she had imagined, and that trust was the rarest currency of all. The next morning dawned with a storm on the horizon, both literal and metaphorical. Alina prepared herself for what lay ahead, knowing that every decision she made could tip the balance between survival and destruction. The sergeant who once tried to expel her was now just one player in a deadly game where the stakes were nothing less than the fate of the nation. The early morning mist clung to the edges of the base like a shroud wrapping around secrets that refused to stay buried. Alina moved silently through the labyrinth of corridors, her heart pounding with a mixture of adrenaline and dread. The envelope that had changed everything was tucked securely beneath her jacket, a constant reminder of the fragile thread she was walking on. The lockdown had transformed the usually bustling base into a ghostly maze. Red lights cast eerie glows on metal walls, and heavy doors sealed shut with a finality that seemed to trap more than just bodies. Alina knew that every step forward was shadowed by watchful eyes, and that betrayal could come from any direction. She used access codes whispered to her in fragmented memories from a mother who had vanished without explanation years ago. Codes that no one else should have known. Codes passed down like a secret inheritance forged in the fire of a past she barely understood. With each beep of the key card, the tension tightened like a noose around her neck as she neared the war room. 2 MPs blocked her path, their faces hard, masks of duty. Their voices were calm but firm, ordering her to halt. She raised her hands slowly, a gesture of peace, but the silence between them was thick with unspoken threats. Then the base intercom crackled to life, and every speaker echoed a voice that stopped everyone cold. "This is the President of the United States, calling for Miss Alina to report immediately to the secure command line." There was no mistaking the authority in those words, and the MPs stepped back, allowing her passage. The moment felt surreal, like the calm before a storm that could break open the fragile order of the base. Inside the war room, the atmosphere was electric. Generals and officers turned toward her as if she had become the axis on which everything now depended. The secure line blinked urgently on the console, and all eyes watched as she reached forward, her hand steady despite the chaos inside her. The voice on the other end was calm, measured, but carried the weight of a nation. She was told that the documents she carried were part of a covert operation to expose a network that threatened national security. A web of deception so deep it had infiltrated places no one dared to name. The president expressed personal trust in her ability to navigate the dangers ahead. The conversation ended with a stark warning and a promise of support. Alina replaced the receiver, feeling the full weight of responsibility settle on her shoulders. The room erupted into Motion plans were drawn up, alliances forged, and the hunt for the shadowy adversaries intensified, yet through it all she remained a solitary figure moving between worlds. Outside the war room, the lockdown deepened. The base was sealed off tighter than ever, and rumors swirled like smoke, whispering of spies, moles, and traitors hidden in plain sight. Alina found herself caught between loyalty and suspicion, her every move scrutinized by friends and foes alike. Her nights became a cycle of restless sleep and frantic research, decoding encrypted files, piecing together fragments of intelligence that hinted at a betrayal so profound it threatened to unravel the very fabric of the military. She realized that the enemy was not just outside the gates, but also inside the walls, where trust was a weapon and truth a casualty. One evening, as she pored over a set of codes, a shadow moved at the edge of her vision. A figure slipped silently into the room, a man she recognized from briefings, but whose allegiance was unknown. His eyes met hers, and in that moment, a silent question passed between them. Were they friend or foe? The answer would change everything. Alina decided to take a risk. She reached out her hand in a gesture of fragile alliance. The man hesitated, then took it and whispered a name she had not heard in years, a name tied to her mother and a secret mission gone wrong. The revelation sent a chill through her veins and opened a door she thought long sealed. The pieces began to fall into place, a puzzle of lies, cover-ups, and hidden agendas, stretching from the highest offices to the darkest corners of the world. The mission she was now part of was bigger than any drill, bigger than any academy test. It was a fight for truth, survival, and justice in a world where shadows held more power than light. But as the web tightened around her, Alina knew that every step forward could trigger a trap. Every ally could be a spy, and every secret uncovered could come at a deadly cost. The sergeant who once tried to expel her was only the beginning of a game that had no rules and no mercy. The atmosphere in the war room had shifted to something almost electric. Every breath, every glance carried the weight of decisions that could alter the course of history. Alina stood in the center, surrounded by generals and intelligence officers who moved like shadows around her, their faces masks of focus and hidden fears. The envelope still rested in her hands, its contents now known. But its implications only just beginning to unravel. General Marks paced slowly as he spoke, his voice low but filled with urgency. We are facing an enemy unlike any before, one that operates within our ranks and beyond borders with precision and ruthlessness. We have the intelligence, but the question remains, who can we trust in a world where alliances shift like sand? Alina listened carefully, her mind racing through every detail, every code, every whispered secret she had uncovered in the last few days. Her mother's past was no longer just a shadow, it was a key to understanding the threat that now loomed over them all. She felt the weight of that knowledge, crushing yet empowering like a flame, burning fiercely inside. Suddenly the room went dark for a moment. The power cut off without warning. Alarms blared and emergency lights flickered on, casting long, ominous shadows across the faces around her. It was a reminder that danger was not just in documents or secrets, but real and immediate. The generals exchanged looks of alarm, and the tension spiked to a new level. When the lights came back, a new message appeared on the main screen, a threat directed at the command center, a warning that the enemy was closer than anyone had imagined. A chill ran down Alina's spine as she realized that the clock was ticking and the game had entered a deadly new phase. As security forces mobilized to secure the perimeter, Alina was pulled aside by a figure she had come to trust, a seasoned intelligence officer who handed her a small encrypted device. Your next steps are critical, he said quietly. This is the key to unlocking the final layer of the threat, but it comes with risks. You must be prepared for anything. She nodded her acceptance, knowing that this mission would demand everything from her: courage, her wits, and her resilience. The halls of the base seemed to close in as she made her way to a secure terminal where she began the painstaking process of decrypting the data. The code was complex, layered with false leads and traps designed to ensnare the unwary. Hours passed as she worked feverishly piecing together fragments of information that painted a picture of a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government and military command. The betrayal was deeper than anyone had feared, and the enemies were not just outside forces but insiders with access and influence. Just as she cracked the final code, a sudden noise behind her made her spin around. A shadow moved swiftly, and a sharp blade glinted in the dim light before her instincts kicked in, and she dodged, narrowly escaping a deadly attack. The intruder vanished into the maze of corridors, but the message was clear. Her life was now in mortal danger. Back in the war room, chaos erupted as alarms signaled a breach in security protocols. The generals and officers scrambled to respond, but Alina knew the real fight was just beginning. She transmitted the decrypted information to the president, along with a detailed report on the threat and the identities of suspected traitors. The secure line buzzed to life once more, and the president's voice came through, steady but resolute. "This is a pivotal moment, Alina. Your bravery and insight have exposed a cancer within our nation, owes you a debt, and we will act swiftly to protect our people. Trust no one until the dust settles, as the base went into full lockdown, and loyal forces moved to secure key positions. Alina prepared for what came next. The battle for truth and survival was no longer confined to drills and simulations, but a real war fought in shadows and secrets. She steeled herself, knowing that the road ahead was fraught with danger, but also with the possibility of redemption and justice. The sergeant who once tried to expel her was now under investigation, along with others whose loyalty was questioned. But Alina knew that the true victory would come not from arrests, but from uncovering the full extent of the conspiracy and restoring trust in the institutions meant to protect in the quiet moments before dawn. Alina stood alone on the observation deck, gazing at the horizon, where the first light of day broke through the darkness. Her journey was far from over, but she had taken the first steps toward reclaiming her future and honoring the legacy of those who had sacrificed before her. The phone call from the president was not just a lifeline, but a beacon of hope in a world clouded by deceit and danger. And as she turned to face the coming challenges, her heart was steady, her resolve unshaken, ready to fight for the truth, no matter the cost. Alina stood alone on the observation deck as the first pale light of dawn stretched across the horizon. The sky was painted in shades of orange and purple, but the beauty of the morning felt distant as her thoughts raced faster than the colors unfolding before her. The war within the walls of the base was over for now, but the battle beyond had only just begun. The events of the past days replayed in her mind. The betrayal, the hidden enemies, the phone call from the president who had become an unexpected lifeline. A lifeline that carried not just hope, but a heavy burden of responsibility. She knew the president's trust was not given lightly, and that the nation's fate rested on the fragile shoulders of a young recruit whose life had been upended by secrets and lies. Her mother's face flashed before her eyes, a ghost from the past whose sacrifices had set this entire chain of events in motion. Alina had finally uncovered fragments of the truth about her disappearance and the covert missions that had been erased from official records. But those answers came with a price. The deeper she dug, the more dangerous the path became. Suddenly, a soft sound behind her made her turn. It was the man she had come to trust, the intelligence officer whose timely presence had saved her more than once. His eyes were tired, but resolute. He spoke quietly, as if not wanting to break the fragile silence between them. "The fight is far from over, Alina. But today, We have a chance to rebuild, to root out the darkness that has festered within our ranks. Alina nodded her agreement, yet a flicker of doubt shadowed her gaze. How do we know who to trust when the enemy wears the faces of friends, when every step forward might lead to a trap? The officer's gaze hardened. Your instincts will be your greatest weapon, along with the knowledge you carry. The truth is a double-edged sword, but it is the only weapon that can cut through the lies back inside the command center. The final arrests had been made and the conspirators unmasked, their faces twisted with shock and defiance as their carefully woven web unraveled. It was a victory hard-earned, but incomplete. For every traitor caught, others slipped through the cracks, shadows retreating to regroup and strike again. The president addressed the nation that evening in a rare live broadcast, his voice steady and clear. He spoke of courage, sacrifice, and the importance of vigilance, reminding everyone that the fight for freedom was ongoing and that heroes often came. From the most unexpected places, his words echoed across the country and gave voice to the silent fear and hope of millions. Alina watched the broadcast from a quiet room, her thoughts tangled between pride and uncertainty. She realized that her journey was no longer just about clearing her name or uncovering family secrets. It had become a mission to protect a nation from threats seen and unseen, from betrayal within and chaos without. As the days passed, she trained harder than ever, preparing for the new role. She had been offered a place on a special task force dedicated to countering internal threats and espionage. The sergeant who once sought to expel her had been reassigned pending investigation, and though his shadow lingered in her mind, she refused to let it define her. One night, as Alina reviewed files late into the evening, a message blinked onto her screen, an encrypted line from an unknown source. The words were simple but chilling. The war is only beginning. And then the connection went dark. A shiver ran down her spine. The past had caught up, but the future was still unwritten, stealing herself. Alina stood and walked toward the window, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. The weight of the world pressed down, but so did a fierce determination to face whatever came next. She whispered a vow to herself and to the memory of her mother, to fight for truth, justice, and the fragile hope of a better tomorrow, no matter the cost. The phone call from the president was not just a turning point in her life. It was the moment she stepped into a larger story, one filled with danger, intrigue, and the unbreakable will to survive. And as the night deepened and the stars blinked cold and distant, she knew that though the path ahead was uncertain, she would never walk it alone. And somewhere in the shadows beyond the reach of light, the enemies watched and waited. Their plans far from finished, and the game far from over. But Alina was ready. And that was a warning that no one could ignore.